Hello friends, and welcome to another video. And welcome to the channel, where for the entire month of June we will be focusing on highlighting queer voices. I'm not entirely solid on the order that these videos are going to be put out, but this is the first one that I'm recording. I know there are going to be some that go up before this, and I'm hoping one of those explains this whole thing better than this one will, because the last thing I want to do is repeat this whole big monologue at the start of each of these videos. So I'm hoping I will have some introduction video to the month that I can link back to for all of these, so I don't have to get into it each time. But for my own sake, we're going to go over vaguely what the idea behind this month is, because for me, this is the first time I'm actively doing it. So I'm sure we all know June is Pride Month. It's the time to focus on both queer struggles and victories. And this year, I wanted to really focus this channel on queer voices because I live in Florida. Things are not going great here. Our governor is very anti everything to do with queer people. Anti a lot of things. And it really frustrated me that he's banning so many books in school. He's banning so much information by taking away these stories and by silencing queer voices and people of color and everybody who's not a straight cis white person. So many young people are losing their representation, and especially in school where you're supposed to be learning about all of these important things, all of a sudden that entire side of life is being taken away just because they think it's not acceptable. It's acceptable for every age because people question their identities at every age. And that made me very, very mad. So I wanted to focus this channel and specifically this month on the books that are being taken away. The books that I'm talking about for this month will all be from trans authors, gay authors, people of color. I want to focus on the voices that are being taken away, because if I make these videos and if people are able to see these videos, they're able to see me talking about these books, maybe they're inspired to go find these books, or if they're not allowed to buy these books, if for whatever reason these stories are being taken away, these videos can still provide information about what the books are, can still share these stories, and can still make the experiences feel more okay for people who are looking for validation with similar stories to what they're feeling. I don't know if that makes a whole lot of sense. I really need to find a more concise way to say it. I want this month to be focused on LGBT books because what better time, you know? It's a really exciting idea for me. I really like the idea of being able to highlight these authors and also reading these stories, because queer stories are something that you kind of have to look out for. You have to go out of your way to find them. So maybe I can present to you something that you haven't heard of before, or something that highlights an identity that you don't normally see, and we can all just expand our reading choices. The first book that I'm going to be reading for this month, which technically it is May 22nd, so it's not June yet, but the first book that I'm reading is Love and Other Disasters by Anita Kelly. This is a book that I bought today. I don't know much about it, but the author, I believe, is non-binary, goes by they, them pronouns. It sounds like a really good time. It's about a culinary competition type of show. It sounds so fun. So Dahlia is the contestant on a cooking show, and all she has to do is not get distracted by her incredibly hot competition. And then you have London, who just came out as non-binary on national television and is now somebody who's representing the queer community. Can London and Dahlia's growing relationship take the heat, or are they about to get burned? That sounds so fun. This book is 367 pages. I haven't heard anybody talking about it, but it just sounds like such a fun time. The premise is so silly. I can only remember reading one other reality TV style book. It was If the Shoe Fits by Julie Murphy. That book, personally, I just didn't really like it. I thought it was a little bit boring, but I hope this book takes itself not seriously. I hope this book takes itself silly. I hope it really plays into how silly shows like this can be. And obviously, I will keep you guys updated on the non-binary representation in this. So, welcome to the reading vlog. 9:30 a.m. update on this book. I'm currently on page 88 of this book, and I genuinely last night I didn't want to put it down because it's just such a fun time. You're following Dahlia and London on this cooking show. Dahlia just got out of a marriage of 6 years-ish, and London just came out as non-binary to everybody on the show, so they are both dealing with their own personal identities and being confident in these new versions of themselves and the ways that they'll be perceived when they tell people these things. If I ever say love in other words when I'm talking about this book, I'm so sorry. Clearly the titles are very, very similar. I don't know if that's intentional or if it just happened to work out that way, but I do think of that every time I read this title. So I'm just gonna call myself out now because it's probably gonna happen at some point. But so far, I'm really, really enjoying this book. I think from the first sentence, it really sets up exactly what you're gonna feel for the entirety of the book. Because within just the first sentence, you know that it's gonna be about the relationships, you know that it's gonna be about food, and you also know that it's gonna be a little silly. And then from there, the entire first page is talking about the setting and the environment that they're in. So right away, it establishes where you are. You get thrown right into it. It just filled me with warm feelings to be reading this story. I do wish the cover had some reference to food or anything to do with the kitchen. It is kind of just the two of them sitting there and then there's nothing on the back. I think this is a really cute cover. I think it looks really good, but I do wish it tied in a little bit more to the story because if you're just looking at this, you have no clue that it has anything to do with food. And I think it's a fun premise and you should play into it a little bit more. But I think my main concern, I'm currently on page 88, but my main concern is that because you get thrown right into it, there are already a couple challenges into the show. I don't know how many challenges there are, but you don't really get to meet the other characters in the show, which I guess they don't really matter that much. They're just kind of side people. You're really focusing on these two and then, you know, the side character that they make friends with or the one that they're an enemy, whatever. But for the most part, they are just this couple and then the other contestants, and you don't really get to know too much about any of these side characters, which I think is okay because it probably would get confusing to introduce that many people who are all doing the same things. And by focusing on this relationship instead of all of the contestants, you're really making it a romance instead of just a reality TV written in a book. But I'm less than 100 pages through and there are already multiple challenges in, so I don't know if the entire book is going to at some point get more in depth with what the actual show premise is, or if that's just kind of the setup for how they meet and it's going to be more focused on their interactions outside of it. I don't know if that's going to tie in because right now it feels like we're just speeding through the show. We're getting to see their interactions and it's enjoyable. They do seem to know each other pretty quickly, like they get along really fast and they have this immediate attraction, but I think in such a high intensity environment it makes sense, so I'm gonna excuse it. Normally it would be frustrating to see characters connect so quickly, but certain scenarios it's okay, and I think this one is okay. I think this works. I just genuinely have no clue where the story is gonna go from here because it feels like the plot is already moving so fast and the characters are just kind of floating through it.
I remembered. I have 2 left feet. Two. Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's horrible. Okay, I kind of like it. Is this thing on? All right. It's currently 10 o'clock and we're in a hotel. Hi. It's currently 10 o'clock and we're in a hotel, but unfortunately the content stops for nothing because I did finish this book, Love and Other Disasters. I'm not even going to bother apologizing for the audio or video quality. You're just getting what you get because this month is going to be full of a lot of questionable content because we are pumping out as much as we can. So Love and Other Disasters by Anita Kelly. I picked this book because it's by a non-binary author. The author goes by they, them pronouns, which I don't see a lot of people who create that use gender-neutral pronouns, and I also don't see a lot of characters that have gender-neutral pronouns. So I thought it was really cool because one of the main characters in this is non-binary, and I wanted to see how that representation is coming from somebody who can identify in that way. I'm going to set this book down because I can't tell for sure if this camera is in focus or not, and I don't want to be holding up a blurry or overexposed book the entire time. In this book, you're following London and Dahlia. They're in a cooking competition, and they're just competing with, I believe it's 12 other contestants. It's something like that, 12 or 16. You're watching them compete for $100,000. Dahlia needs it for loans and various other money troubles, and London wants it to start an LGBTQ nonprofit of some sort. They want to use it for good because they already have a lot of money just to exist, so they want to use it for other people. I think I would give this book a solid 4 stars. I don't think it was bad at all. I think it was a very fun read from the very first sentence. I was having a good time while reading it. It gave me a really warm feeling on the inside, but I do think it touched on a lot of different topics and it didn't really go in depth with any of them. I'm going to be reading off of my notes on this phone that I'm also using as a microphone, so my apologies for everything that's happening right now. I said I wasn't going to apologize, but I think I have to because I genuinely have no clue what's happening and I'm not going to know until I'm editing. So we're going to hope for the best. Those are my friends in there. I will say, I also cannot read the notes that I have because I'm looking directly into my phone's flashlight to do this, so you're gonna have to be patient with me. This could take a while. For one thing, I think the use of neutral pronouns in this book is very natural, which is to be expected considering the author uses them. Obviously, they're gonna be very familiar with what is comfortable and how they want other people to use their pronouns and how they want them to be addressed. London as a character feels very real because it's coming from real experience. I like that it's not done in a way that is overly cliche. It feels very natural to how somebody coming out or how somebody who's been out or whatever, it feels very natural to how that experience would go. London is getting comments from viewers of the show and they're saying, hey, thank you for being this representation for me, and you can kind of see the author is writing about something while also doing that thing, and it's cool to see it happening in real time, I guess. I also really like when it's talking about those comments. One comment in particular said, hey, can you shout out any non-binary people that were born male? Because most representation for non-binary people is female to non-binary. So I like that this book, while it didn't have that representation, it did acknowledge that we need to see more of it. Because that's something I was thinking about while reading this, because also for the representation in this book, it doesn't tell you explicitly what London's sex was before saying that they're non-binary. You're about 130 pages through. I believe it mentions what hormone they're using, and it never explicitly says they are a boy or girl, or they are perceived as whichever one. Even when they are being misgendered by other people on the show or in their personal life, it never explicitly says what they're being misgendered as. And I thought that was a really cool way of doing it, because if you know what hormones they're taking, you do still know, but it just feels like it's really done in a respectful way to just not mention what they were born as. It just makes it seem like that's not significant, because it really isn't. If that's not what they identify as, then it doesn't matter. Dahlia's brother is trans, so you've got multiple trans people in this book. You got people questioning their sexuality or saying that they're queer. No clear definition, just queer as an overall term, which I thought was also cool. I've never seen a book do that before. Hopefully I'll see more of that as this month goes along, but I really enjoyed that. I thought it was pretty relatable. It was easy to understand and easy to read because the premise is really fun. We've all seen cooking shows before, and so having that in a book just makes sense. You're able to jump right into it, and this book really does. You jump directly into the story and the plot of the TV show. I believe this movie is Independence Day. I am watching it in the background instead of looking at the camera. You'll have to excuse me for not making eye contact throughout the majority of this clip. But the thing with jumping right into the show, I do feel like it could have done so much more with the actual idea of the show, with talking about the food and them being in this competition and working against each other and also being forced together, having these different challenges and all the other people. You don't really get to know anything about the other competitors. Like, there's the one that's a friend, there's the one that's an enemy, but besides that, you don't even really get to know everybody's names. They are very much secondary. They do not really matter to the story at all, which I do think makes it more of a romance. It makes you more focused on the two main characters, but at the same time, I would have appreciated knowing knowing a little bit more about what was going on with the show, because that's the whole reason they're together in the first place. So when you're brushing that aside, it feels like nothing else matters, because this is what should matter to them. So even at the end of the show, when you're finding out everything and who won and who got kicked out and all of these things, ideally it would be super dramatic and super tense, and I didn't really feel anything towards that, because the entire time the show was like the secondary thing to their romance. I wrote that it's vaguely Grumpy Sunshine. They do have contrasting personalities. Dahlia is kind of a little bit all over the place, and London is very much serious and focused, but also they're both focused and also they're both adventurous. So I don't know. They're kind of portrayed as being opposites, which I think largely is because Dahlia has really untamable hair. It's a lot of cliches that I've read in other books where they are opposites attract, but I don't really think that this book was that. One thing that I will mention, that the one thing that stuck with me that was weird, is they did at one point say somebody was dressed like a lesbian because they were dressed in a more masculine way. That was like the one phrase that was strange to me. I don't think that was really necessary, which I guess could be an ironic thing. It could just be saying that as like a silly throwaway comment, which then goes to like, are you aware of the fact that it's silly, and is it actually silly? Which it didn't feel like it just felt like an actual statement, which was odd. I don't think it was necessary, and it was a weird descriptor because it doesn't mean anything. You can't dress like a lesbian. It is open door. They do have a couple of intimate scenes together. I do think that was focused on more than any other aspect in the relationship, which was frustrating to me. I really wanted to see more of this cooking competition. I wanted to see them together on the show. I wanted to see how they interact with other people. I wanted to see all of the competition aspects, and instead I was hearing about them meeting up in their hotel room, and I didn't need that. I understand that's what some people are there for, and I also appreciate the fact that it is queer romance that has intimate scenes. I think that's great, but it's not personally what I wanted to read. So that's not a criticism of the book. It's just something that I personally didn't really care for. And then again, I wrote, I can't care about the dramatics of the relationship if the big moments in other aspects of the story are brushed over. Again, referring to the TV show where it didn't really seem to matter who was getting kicked off, who was there. A lot of times the characters are saying that they just blacked out, or they forgot, or they didn't even realize what was happening. And that's great for the characters, but as the reader, I would love to know. Like, as the reader, I'm not feeling that intense emotion, so it doesn't seem like it matters to me, even if the characters are going through this super stressful time and they say they blacked out. Like, that just means that I have no context or anything to go with what's happening in the show, which then means I have no clue what stressful things brought them together, and then I have no reason to root for their relationship because I don't know what it came from. And I think the main issue is miscommunication, which I know is something that people don't like, so yeah, I think the main conflict in this book comes down to them just not talking to each other. I don't think that's a spoiler. I think saying something is miscommunication trope is fairly vague, but if that is something you are frustrated by, just a fair warning that that is kind of the thing that happens. Another thing is, it does briefly touch on their parents. They have questionable relationships with their parents, and I wish it had touched on that more, because if it had really gone into their relationships with their parents, and if they had really terrible sad moments together where they maybe bonded over that, or if they went into more detail about what happened that caused them to have such bad relationships, I feel like if they had just sat with those sad feelings some more, it would have mattered a lot more in the end, because at the end of the show, the parents are brought in to watch the finale with everybody, and I think the interactions would have mattered a lot more and would have felt a lot more genuine had we seen why they mattered to begin with. I did get chills while reading the interactions from both parents with both of the main characters, but I think that has less to do with the writing and more just because I could relate to those relationships. So when the parents were talking to their children, it meant a lot to me, like as a personal thing, but not necessarily to the story. I didn't really care about the characters and their relationship with their parents. I cared about my relationship with my parents. So I guess it was cool in that way, but that's not something that you can bet on, because if the reader doesn't relate to these characters, they're going to have a hard time getting into it. And I think that's kind of the main thing. It touches on a lot of big issues where if you can relate to these characters and if you feel the same way that they do, then this story will make sense to you. However, if you are not non-binary, or if you have a good relationship with your parents, or, you know, whatever things come up in this book. They're being so rude right now. If you can't relate to the way that these characters are feeling, I think it might be hard to get into this book, because it's very surface level with a lot of their issues. Even with their money issues, with their mental health, it just doesn't really go into any of that, and I wish it would have, because I know that if I didn't personally relate to so much about these characters, I wouldn't have cared even a little bit. I wrote that it perfectly represents a lot of big feelings and ideas in theory, but it doesn't really give enough time to any one idea. It's a decently fun read, but it could be so much more, but again, it could just be a personal thing where I'm craving these descriptions, and if you're a casual reader who can't personally relate to so many struggles, then maybe it would be okay. I thought it was a fun read. I just thought it could have been a little bit more. I hope that didn't spoil anything. When it's just a good, fun, lighthearted book like this, there's not that much to spoil because it's not really about the plot, it's just the characters experiencing each other. I haven't really thought about the format that I want to do for these videos. I don't know if I want to do proper sit-down reviews or if I want to talk through each point every time I have something to say, if I want to just come through at the end. It's kind of going to be an experimental month of just doing a variety of things for these because 30 reading vlogs is a lot. This is not going to be how they are. We're just on a trip right now, so probably this video and the next one will be here, and then I'll be back home in my usual place. So that is my reading review for Love and Other Disasters. This book is wet because it was raining outside. It's okay. It's all right. I hope that this clip recorded decently okay and that you can hear me somewhat and that the camera is focused, whatever else. This was a very chill reading vlog because it's just the first one. We've got a long way to go. I'm excited though. We got a lot of books to talk about. So I will catch up with you guys. It's currently May 24th, so for me it won't be tomorrow, but for you it'll be tomorrow. I will see you with another video. You know the drill. Everything's in the description. It's late. I'm tired. I want this flashlight out of my eyes. So, bye.